episode, we are joined by Ole. Ole is a fantastic jazz musician. He's a lecturer at the university, and he's a very successful speaker. Each year, he has 20 to 25 speeches, in addition to having a full-time job that he charges 2,000 to 3,000 euros for. And we are going to talk about the creative process of building a talk. So either you are a completely new speaker and you are just sitting down working on creating your first keynote, or you are an experienced speaker and you want to take a look at your talk and see what can become better. We're sharing some amazing creative advice, how to create stories, how to get inspired from other speakers, why is a good exercise to go from 30 minutes to 5 minutes to really get to the right points. I really enjoyed this session with Ole. It was super helpful. I'm going to improve a lot of my presentation. So let's dive in and learn the creative process from a creative speaker about how to create awesome presentations, because that's how you are going to get rebooked, is by having a really, really, really great talk. Well, super cool to have you here today.
Great to be here.
Yeah,
Thank you
we're
for the
both
invite.
North Norwegians, so we have this special bonds. For those who doesn't know, North Norwegians are special people in Norway. We are very crazy and cool.
We are all related
Somehow.
somehow.
That's right. So, Ole, you talk about creativity, and this talk is gonna cover a lot of those aspects. A lot of speakers either work on a new presentation at some point in life, or they are constantly upgrading the one they have. So we're gonna dig into a bit of those. But first, let's get to know you a bit. I'm curious, how do you open at your talks when you go on stage? How do you usually open it?
Well, normally I will often talk about my daughter's arts and craft work from school and tell people why her work is not creative. So that's a bad dad. But that's normally my start, because I want to tear down a lot of these myths we have about creativity. And one of those are, as long as you do something aesthetical from arts and crafts or music and sculpture, you are, per definition, creative. So that's where I normally start.
Been to any of your talks?
My daughter, she demands some royalties from my fees, of course. She's a hard businesswoman. We have an arrangement.
No. Okay. Yeah. Wow. That's it. That's a new one. How do you typically close your talks? Like, what's like when you go on stage? Like, what's the last sentence you say, or what's your last slide? Like, what's a good talk closing for you?
I do a lot of talks where I do have an instrument, a grand piano on stage, and if I have that, I will normally end my talk with giving the audience an appeal to think about something, and then I will play a piece of music at the end. So that's my secret weapon, to use the music.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Ole is also a musician, a
stage.
jazz musician. Ole, what do you do like if you're on stage and like, oh wow, there's no piano here? What do you do?
Well, not all arrangements have a piano available, so I do a lot of talks without it as well. But normally I try to end with somehow to engage the audience in some way, so that they are active at the end. So it's just like not me just saying thanks for coming, please come again, have a great day.
That's a good one. Are you speaking full time now? And how long have you been doing this public speaking?
I started doing public speaking keynotes about 8 or 9 years ago, starting very slow. Now I do have a full job as an associate professor in music, where I'm the head of a master's program in music here in Oslo. And at the same time, I do a lot of my own music projects, and also so it's a mix of the works from the academics and the music world, and the more business-oriented keynotes.
And I see like most speakers, they have a full-time job. So how many gigs do you do per year? Like 10, 15?
I would say now, this business is quite strange, so it goes a lot of ups and downs. Now we do this recording in January. January is always the slow month for music and keynotes and everything. But on average, I would say around 2 to 3 gigs a month.
Yep.
25
and
a
your
year,
average
maybe.
Rate, roughly?
It's about 2.5, 3.5 thousand
Cool.
euros.
This one is I get a lot from beginner speakers who are just starting out. They're like, how do I mix this with my normal job? Do you take a personal day off? Like, can you give just some advice? Have you done it?
Well, my best advice is to get a job in the academic world, because then you can arrange your day pretty much
Okay.
as you like. So I'm not sure if my ideas would be transferable to any other job, but because I can plan my weeks pretty much ahead and change my schedule pretty much as I like. So that's one of the perks about being in the academic world. So that would be my best tip. Get a PhD and start in
Yeah.
the academic world.
And last question about you and your speaking gig before we dive into the creativity is I saw your reviews on Talisten. We have the same agency, so it's kind of like a double question. Where do you get most of your gigs now? And what is the audience left with? Because I see you've been booked to quite a different kind of companies, from waste management to all over the place. So what is the audience with after
Yes.
you done your talk? Like, why did they book you? What did they want to achieve? And how do you get those 2025 gigs? 2020, how do you get them?
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, I started to do a lot of, because I have my music background and I have an MBA in leadership management. And in the beginning, I was doing talks about innovation, and I was competing with the 300 other keynote speakers on innovation. And then I wrote my master's thesis on creativity management, how to manage people's creativity. And then I started to shift my focus more on the creativity and dive into that world. So that was my first thing. And then it was the hard thing was to convince the customers that this is something they need, because they also think that creativity is about arts and music and stuff. But it's really about the ability to solve problems in new ways and to free the mind to think new ways. And when it comes to that, it's much easier to sell that to a lot of different things, because in waste management, you have some problems you need to solve, and our minds work pretty much the same whether we're solving musical problems or waste management problems. So that's where I come in and try to share my knowledge from creativity research in a lot of different
Very
places.
capitalist efficient.
Yes, I'm not sure if I answered all the questions
So
there,
just
but
like, how did you get those 25 gigs? Like, it does most come from your agent, from our agent Nils? Do you contact conferences or businesses yourself? Like, just that's, yeah.
I think I get some from my agents, of course. I think most of my gigs come from referrals, because I've been to a conference and a year later, one of them are having a conference, and that's like the best tips to give to new people that want to get into the speaking business. It takes time. Some people they write a book or they do something and the bookings just flows in, but it's pretty much like an exponential thing. You speak at one place and you get 2 gigs the next year, and then they double up and it grows. So I think that's the biggest
Yeah.
pipeline
I'm going on
for
stage
me.
in February now, 6th, and the company that booked me, they saw me live in Oslo 3.5 years ago. And 3.5 years ago, they said, like, we should really book you for a conference. So it just, yeah, you're completely right. It can take some time, but and it's exponential. So,
Yeah, and for everyone that likes stressing out, like nothing is happening, no gigs are coming in, it's just things are often happening behind the scenes, and then just one day you get 2 bookings a week, or you get booked for like 6 months ahead, or
yeah,
so.
it's a crazy business, but it's fun. Once those bookings come in, you're like, yes, this is good. So Ola, about
Yes.
creativity, let's dive into it. So we're going to talk first a bit about like short talks and creative hard mode. That's our second topic. First, we're going to look at constraints and clarity. So so you talk about like how do you define one core idea in a single sentence? What's life in that?
Well, what I do a lot, in addition to my keynotes, I write a lot in like magazines, in research magazines online, on Norwegian newspapers and stuff, about themes that are related to creativity. And for me, writing is very good when it comes to like boiling
Mm.
your ideas down. Because in the beginning, when you're writing some text, it has to be like 4,000 characters. And it's so hard because you have all these things you want to say. So my best tip, like for having a very clear statement on stage, is to write more, because then you really need to pinpoint down what you want to say and try to say it like for with a couple of sentences instead of like a whole page. So sit down and write.
And how do you like define like one clear audience action? Like not a vague takeaway. So say I have a slide about Gen Z and recruitment. In my case, how do I define like that one clear audience action? Especially if I've been written a lot now. Like how do you then go and start to like, this is what?
Well, it's a double thing, because sometimes I think we should try, because all keynote speakers nowadays are like very interested in like, okay, we have to give the audience some tools that they can take home, and it has to be really simple. Sometimes I think we should try to work against that urge and really just try to give the audience some new thoughts without giving them everything. They have to do something themselves. But if you're going to give them challenges, I think it's very important, in my case, not to just say, okay, now you have all this information. Now I wish you all luck, and try to be more creative in your everyday life, because that is nothing. It's more like, do this and make it very observable, not just be inspired, but do this one thing and make it time bound, like for the next week, in the next 24 hours, by the end of this day, and make it very like low friction. One step. It's not like for the next half a year, you should do these 10 things, but make it like very easy. Because I see a lot of keynotes, they are like, try to give some tools, and the tools are very vague, and it's very hard to implement them. So if you're actually trying to give some tools, make
Very
them
easy.
very easy.
Just back to that, getting that one single sentence. So say I have a chapter about I have a chapter about 6 tips for leadership with Gen Z, and say I write a lot for each chapter to get it out. How do I then step back and actually choose those one or two super powerful sentences I will do on stage? Do you have any tips for me how I choose those? It's very interesting, this one.
Yeah, in my experience, is I think that's where a lot of beginner speakers do it wrong. They tend to like work a lot of on their presentations and stuff, but most important is to practice it out loud. And if you really want to go hardcore, you should do a recording of yourself, because we have all, one thing is to write it and it can be very clear and concise, but to actually reshape that into a speech is very hard. So just to do that recording and listen to it and see, do I understand what I'm actually trying to say? That is, for me, it's kind of shameful every once, because you have all these detours and stuff, but then you do another recording,
You start to
then you
remove
try
things
to
you
like,
think yourself, okay, this sentence is not so clear, or this can be better, and you just start to remove, right?
yeah. And also, to, if you are like in a speaking agency or a speaking community, get feedback from other speakers. And that's also like a bit painful in the beginning, but find someone you trust and do your speech in front of them, or invite them to a conference you're speaking to, and get that
It's actually
feedback.
a good investment, because not all not all the best speakers will do it for free. But I know Tarlisten, we had a session where we were 4 speakers and Nils, and everybody did like 50 minutes of their talk, and all the 3 other speakers were sitting, and their only job was to destroy you, like kind of like, you know, destroy everything that can be that's bad, and then super straight feedback, and that was so powerful, so powerful. Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting. And then like short talks, like you call it like creative hard mode. And if a talk is cut to 7 minutes, what should go first? Before we dive in, Ole, I spoke at 8 minutes of digital marketing, I think 9 years ago. I had no idea what I was doing. My speeches were usually 25 minutes, and they say you have 8 minutes. That was so difficult to what should go, what should stay. I somehow managed to be like the top 3 speeches based on like feedback from the audience. That was something went right, but I had no idea what I was doing. Can we look at the process? So if a talk is cut to 7 minutes, what should go first, and why is this a good creative exercise?
Well, to answer the first question, why it's a creative exercise, I think one of the best ways to become more creative is not to think outside the box, but to make the box even smaller. And just to see when it's like creating music, I have like on the piano 88 keys. And sometimes when I practice, I say, okay, I can just use 5 of these keys. How can I make music with just these 5 keys? And then I have to push my creativity really much. And it's the same thing when you make the room more narrow in kind of how much time you have. You have to think about all these elements in your talk in a new way. I did a keynote now, and normally I do like 30, 45 minutes, and then it was 5 minutes. That was really hard. And of course, you cannot cover all the things, and you have to kill most of your darlings in that speak. But what goes first? It's all these background stories, and if you tell stories like a lot of people do, you have to like really pinpoint what's the point of this story, and to see what do I have to say in order to make this story a part of my talk. And sometimes you can go right to the point of the story, or maybe you can just you don't have time to tell the story, but you just tell the main point in the story. And a lot of what I have learned that sometimes when I did the talks, I used several examples to enlighten one point. And then I realized after doing short talks, I don't need that. I do not need like 2 or 3 background stories and examples. I just need one really good one.
Cool.
And also, like a lot of times when we want to make a point, you say, let me first explain this and then explain this. You don't need that either sometimes. You can go straight to the point. So like, can you pinpoint what you're actually trying to say, like in 3 sentences? This is my main message. And then say, what do I need in order to make these 3 sentences come alive? So start with the ends, so to say.
And this is a very interesting exercise. I work with a lot of speakers who are lecturers in university, or they do like full daytime courses and teaching. And for them, it's often a challenge to do this in 20 minutes because you're very used to, I've been also lecturing, you're lecturing, you're very used to, okay, I have 8 hours to fill today. So we just do a lot of sentences.
Yeah.
Right. And here you have to like, so it's better actually if you're a lecturer, it's better to start with creating a 5 or 10 minute story and think you're on TEDx and then expand it into a 20-minute talk, because then it's easier, right? So because then you really like, I need to be straight to the point.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Also, when I work in my day job as a associate professor, I have all this time, So, and also you get these aha moments where you think, okay, do I actually need to speak so much? Maybe the students should have a saying as well.
Okay, so let's talk about incubation in practice. Can you first say, Ole, what do you think about the topic incubation? And then we jump into what does a realistic prep sprint look like? So incubation, what do we mean here in terms of speaking?
Yeah, incubation is something I talk about a lot in my talks because it's very linked up to creativity. Because research shows that when we're actually trying to get the best ideas, what we do wrong is we sit and we work on the problem a lot. But the magic happens often when we step away from the problem. And there are some things happening in our brains. I will not go too deep into that, but that's the reason why we get the best ideas when we're in the shower or we're on a jogging trip or we go skiing, because then the mind shifts focus, but the brain continues to work on the problem without us knowing it. And I use that a lot in my preparations. Sometimes I will not have my keynote done before like the same morning or the day before, because I have like a vague idea about what I'm going to speak about. And then I walk my dog a lot, and I actually go on walks talking out loud to myself.
It looks weird, but
so yeah, so one thing is I learned it's important to have these things in the air, because then people will not assume you're crazy. They will think you're social. That's a very important thing. And because good ideas, it takes a while. And when you do these out loud talks, you have all the time, and you can go into different areas, and you can talk about that, and you can talk about that, and then you get another idea, you can talk about that. And after some time, you can say, okay, maybe I can use that idea. and that idea. And that's also a way for me to like, I'm not too happy about doing the same
Yeah.
keynotes
How much
all the
does
time.
change it when change it? So the one you usually do, how much percentage do you change and keep?
I think about my keynotes more like an accordion. It's like a music instrument. So you can have it really short and
Hmm.
you can expand it. So I have a lot of stories I use, and sometimes I have some stories that I like more than others, and some stories are shorter, some stories are longer, and then I can use all these different stories and I can go really deep into some creativity models, or I can keep them very short. So that's how I work, because I have like framework I often use, and then I can expand it as much as I think is good
Okay.
for the audience.
So if I'm working on remaking my talk, or I'm working on completely new talk, first sit down, kind of do some deep work, and then let it go. Go for a walk, sauna, get the mind off, right, and let it marinate, so to say. Yeah. And you mentioned now stories. Like, how do you test if a story actually moved the audience towards like the main idea of your talk? What's a good way to test stories?
Well, the best way to test them is in front of the audience, but normally you should have an idea about the effect of the story before you come there. I think you really have to love the
Yeah.
story yourself if you think it's a good story, because and you have to stay away from all the really obvious ones. So what I do, I like to read, and I read a lot of, and when it comes to my subject, creativity, creativity has been a part of human life since the beginning. So I read a lot of history books, innovation history, fiction, nonfiction, and to really find these funny stories about how human creativity works. And then I see, okay, I have a file on my computer where I save these stories. I think, okay, I had the story about the frog from that author on that page, and I write a little summary of the story. And then I probably have like 100 stories, but maybe I use 10 of them, like the most. But can work like for a really short story, and they can also work as a longer story. Some people that are really good at this storytelling can have like they can take like a story that you and I can tell in 40 seconds. They can make it into a 20-minute story. And to experiment with how much time you should use on the story, and how much time used on the actual point of the story. That is something I think you have
That's
to
enough.
test it out. Like we said, out loud for yourself, in front of others, in front of the audience. And often when I talk to people that've been to my keynotes, what they often remember is the stories. And if they like the story, I think it's a keeper. And if they also remember the point of the story, that's the real goal.
Yes, stories can be powerful to get like insights and points across. But like, when should you land the insight without killing the emotion? You're in a deep story, and by the way, big research by Deloitte, 49 Gen Z, like this and that. Like, how do you how do you don't kill the emotions of the story?
Yeah, and that is one thing I learned from another speaker on our agencies. This thing about some people in the audience, they would like the facts, they would like the research, blah blah blah. Some people they want the humor, and some people they want the feeling, like to feel these emotions. I have experienced that you can also sometimes you can tell the point
Yeah.
first and
Hmm.
then the story, and to switch up these things, because normally you would say, yesterday I was walking and I saw a bird, and the bird was sad, blah 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 blah, and then this is also how it works in your life, blah blah blah. Sometimes you can tell the point first and then the
Hmm.
story,
That's an interesting one.
and try to shift these things around. Because if you watch like a parody of
Yeah.
a TED talk, you know what I'm saying? You know, like this thing like when they tell a story and you feel like, okay, just get on with the story and
Yeah.
give me the point. So it's I think again you have to practice these things and you have to experience it, because there's no like formula you can get, like get the story, then the point, and the audience will be happy. You have to see, and sometimes you also have to improvise on stage. You have probably experienced it. You see like now the audience is really enjoying the story, and then you have to
You're like,
make the
oh,
story
where
longer
does this
maybe.
go?
And for me, who likes to improvise, I think that's a big
Yeah,
fun.
I do it sometimes, but always like it depends a bit on the conference. If it's a very big conference, a very strict time limit, I'm a bit scared of improvising. But if it's like an internal event where
Yeah.
I know if I go 2 minutes over time, I'm not gonna get executed, it's kind of like yeah.
Yeah, of course. When you see those numbers on the clock turning red, that's not time to improvise. That's the time to state your script. But also when it comes to stories, I think telling stories is also an art, so it has to be practiced. And again, you have a lot of dead meat
Yeah.
in storytelling that doesn't need to be there. And I have had a great help from like telling my stories and getting feedback from Nils and other experienced speakers. Like, you don't need to tell that. That's not important for the story
Yeah.
or the point.
I think one of the
So
best, this is my opinion, one of the best storytelling coaches in Norway, Arman Vesta. He's so good at telling stories and
yeah.
and help. So if somebody want to be a good storyteller, check out Arman Vesta.
Yeah, and again, when you see all these great storytellers on the Norwegian speaker scene, go
Yeah.
and see them live, because that is one of the things that I learned most from, like watching other
And that
speakers
goes
on
straight to our
stage.
next chapter, so to say, expertise through input. It's like all the best athletes, they sit at home and they watch just how did this go, how did it hit the ball, like how did this football player kick the ball. And I think like more speakers should embrace that, to like sit down. And usually a lot of speakers, they go to a conference and they're like, oh yeah, I just charged 3,000 to be here for 30 minutes and I'm going to go home and do my business. But it's such huge value to stay and just have a notepad and just watch the other speakers. It's a free lesson and get information. But like,
Yeah.
what patterns should you speakers look for when watching great talks? Like what should you like try to take note of?
I think I use the same mindset as I use when I analyze music, which has been a part of my life for a much longer time. Like, what is really good and what is really bad. Because if you can watch other people do mistakes, you don't have to do them yourself. When it comes to like, if you see a program at the conference, I also try to watch as many as the keynotes as I possibly can, whether it's one of the superstar or it's a beginner, because sometimes you find some, okay, that was not so good. I should definitely stop doing that also. And also you can see some, they are sitting down on stage. That creates a really good experience for the audience. They are like moving down into the audience. Maybe I should try and do that, or maybe I should definitely not do that. Or to see all these things, because speaking is not just standing on stage reading from a script. It's so much more. If it was that, you could just send them the script and someone could read it for them. So about like stage presence and all these things, it's so important. And you can watch TED Talks and keynotes online, but actually being in the room, feeling the energy, that's so much to learn from
Yeah,
just
and the
being
thing
there.
is, it's so much to learn. Like I remember, like one time I saw Arman, and he's like taping some tape on the stage. I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh no, this is where I'm gonna be when the light is for this slide, and this is where I'm gonna stand when this happens." And then, I mean, Thomas Giertsen did a show in Ålesund. The amount of preparation he did with the technical team, I was standing there. I was just like, "Whoa!" I just usually say, "Hey guys, can you turn on my presentation?" And you can learn so much. But then it's like this ethical question, like how do you ethically adapt structural transitions to your own message without like, say, copy pasting another speaker? Where's the line?
Well, like Pablo Picasso said that
Copy?
good artists borrow, great artists steal. So I think you can steal a lot, but it will not work if you don't make it your own. So you can go and watch all these talks, and you can try to like, but if we should do like Arman or one of the others, it wouldn't be as good as what he does. So we can be inspired by it, but in the end, it has to feel like right for us. If you go on stage in like borrowed clothes, it doesn't feel very well. So, and it's also thinking Harald doing his talk. He doesn't use any PowerPoint, and he's a great storyteller. And I will not have my keynote as he has it, because he has his own way of doing it. But like the way he tells
With the
stories,
he has the devil horns and everything. It's so
yeah,
cool.
yeah, he has some props. I use a lot of props myself, but like I steal some of his effects. But it's not like I want to copy his stories, but I get inspired from the way he can tell a story. And a lot of other good storytellers are. It's pretty much about their presence on stage and the energy that they are sending out from the stage.
Okay, well, so if somebody like who watch this and they sit down and like, okay, I need to either redo my story or they're in the process of creating their first talk ever, like, what are the first 3 steps if we summarize that?
Well, the first 3 steps, I think when I look back at my first keynotes, when we all do that, we probably
Yeah.
feel a bit ashamed because they sucked. Yeah, I remember in the beginning, I thought I had to like wear a shirt and a blazer and be very corporate, have everything planned out and a lot of cool PowerPoints and stuff. So but I think it was necessary to go through those steps. So just accept that, okay, in the beginning, it will be bad sometimes. That's like the first step. And it comes from everything, whether it's music or anything you want to go into, accept that sometimes it's really bad. The second tip would be to, if you're gonna suck on stage, find a stage that is safe. So whether it's practice, like we said, practice in front of peers and friends and other speakers, because my opinion, the speaking community in Norway, it's very individual at one time, we all want to get booked and stuff, but at the other side, it's also very inclusive. People want to help each other. So in my opinion, if you ask someone for help to do a keynote session, most people are eager because everyone know that it's helpful for themselves as well. So to be a part of like an agency is very nice, not just in order to get like bookings, also to get that environment and support from other speakers, because it can be a very lonely profession. I think that was
Yeah, 2
that
tips.
was
Do you
2
have one
tips,
last
was it?
one? Especially maybe for experienced one, like.
Well, yeah. And the last tips I would say is to read books about the subject that you're into and all these areas around your subject. Because one of the dangers about having like this great speech that you go travel the world with is that at some point it will be outdated. And I think it's better to make small shifts in a keynote than just to one day realize that I need to trash my whole keynote and take in a whole new one. So like I said, with this accordion, it has different like safe things that, this works, this works, this works. Try to sometimes take one of these pieces out and install a new one. If I always end up with this model, let's try to use another model. If I always start with that story, let's try and start with another story. So experiment a bit on stage with new
Always develop.
material.
So always develop. And Ole, if we can give one advice to speakers watching this right now, what would that advice be?
One advice is I think a lot of speakers experience that they have this feeling that everyone else is getting booked, and they sit alone and think, I have no bookings coming up. I have one booking the last one. I think you have to accept that that's how the business is. I know really good speakers that have like 2 out of 3 months with no bookings, and then they have 10 bookings suddenly. That's like the normal way. And then you see things on LinkedIn and all this social media. People are everywhere, but it's not like that all the time.
Okay, well, thank you. Wow, I have some homework to do myself now to look at my talks. Thanks so much for coming. This was a great and fun conversation, and thank you for giving us an insight on how to work creatively on our talks. Nice.
Thank you so much for having me here. I learned so much, and now I need to go back to the accordion.
Hey, I hope you liked this episode. If you are a speaker and you already have paid gigs, but you want more, bigger stages and more consistency in the amount of bookings, we work one-on-one with speakers to help them get more gigs and increase their sales. Check out Become a Speaker NO in the link below. If you're just starting out or you have had a few gigs and you want to really become a successful public speaker, check out our 8-week bootcamp. Here, we help speakers create their speaker reel, website, positioning, beautiful presentation with amazing slides, storyline, and also land that first big paid speaking gig. Check out the 8-week program below. And I'm always excited to work with passionate speakers who have a very interesting story and valuable advice to share.